Welcome back, everybody, from our little spring break vacation that we had there last month. As always, we want to encourage participation in all ways. So feel free to keep your camera on. Since it's such a small group, too, feel free to keep your camera or your speaker on and just kind of chime in and out of the conversation as it happens. Um, we are going to start just how we normally do by building our brave space. I know things are crazy right now as a preschool teacher. I'm like literally sweating right now from running here to there to everywhere and just trying to get everything done before the end of the year. So just asking that you take this hour to really be present. You never know where that little nugget of a new tool that you can add to your toolbox will come from. So just being here with us in this hour, be open to the conversation and what we're about to learn. It might be something that you're not comfortable with, but just being open to how could I, try this out in my own space. And as always, we just kind of want to build that community of arts integrated instructors who are learning from one another. So engage in whatever way makes you feel comfortable, whether that's through the chat or just speaking out in the group, which we hope that since we're in this small group, we can all just kind of talk as if we're in the same room together. As you know, we are advocates of teaching through the arts for all of the reasons listed here on our screen, just to be able to really empower our teachers and our students. And as an organization, we support, promote, and advocate for that on a daily basis. So, I see a lot of familiar faces here now, but be sure to spread the word with colleagues and friends. We really, work hard for this work and want to get it out there for all of our students to learn through. There's a variety of ways we can teach through the arts, and one of those specific strategies is called arts integration. So in that particular model, we are teaching an art form and the content in equal with one another. So we are really focusing on and experiencing an art form and giving our students an opportunity to create through that outlet as well. Today, we're super pumped because we have Michael Smith with us from What If Puppets. He's an arts integration specialist focusing on full-time residencies in elementary schools, where he's collaborating with teachers to use arts integration techniques in their core curriculum lessons. He has taught and designed curriculum for over 30 years. For numerous arts organizations across the country. And in addition to that work, he is also the editor-in-chief of The Object, which is a newspaper as art object debuting this summer. So I'm going to hand it off to you, Michael. Welcome. Thanks for being here.
Well, thank you. I think you said a safe space or brave space today.
Brave space, yes.
Good. I would, especially since we have such a nice, intimate group, I would recommend that everybody choose a little bravery in this moment. And let's see what happens if we all unmute these microphones. It can maybe feel a little more conversational. If the cat starts crying in the background, I get it. But thank you so much, Lauren. I'm so very pleased to be here. I want to thank Phyllis as well for making this possible. I feel really honored to get a chance to speak to you all today. And I'd like to say, to speak with you. I like that idea better. Um, I am an arts integration specialist is my official title. I do work for the company What If Puppets, which is based here in Kansas City, Missouri. Formerly known as the Messner Puppet Theater. We rebranded about 2 or 3 years ago. Our founder retired about 10 years ago, and the board finally decided to sort of worry about the next 35 years instead of the previous 35 years with a new name. Currently, I do work with kindergarten through third grade students and their teachers. So my work is kind of half and half. It's teacher facing, it's also student facing. And we're going to talk today about kids, chaos, and collaboration, and how hopefully all three of those things can coexist without us losing either our minds or our jobs. I feel really fortunate to work in a residency style program. I get to visit 4 schools. I spend an entire week at each school. I get to feel and sort of become part of the fabric of that school. My time with the students is really only 45 minutes a month because I spend an entire week at each school, like traveling, you know, back and forth between classrooms. Um, I'm the primary educator in charge of running what I kind of term as play sessions with these students, and I do my best to get the teachers involved. And slowly over the year, we get a little more involved until there's a co-teaching sort of feel to it. And then the real privilege around everything you're going to hear today is that I also get to use a puppet. It can make life so much easier, surprisingly, if you've got a puppet in hand. Usually that puppet is the jumping off point for the lesson or the play that we're going to engage in. And sometimes it comes back out as like a carrot, like, hey, if we're able to accomplish this goal, good, we'll get to bring the puppet back out as sort of a reward in the story-based play that we're going to have. But sometimes the puppet stays away and it's just me and we do our thing and then we get to say our goodbye. I had a really great experience. One little anecdote here as we really jump in. And the reason I think that the puppetry gives me like just an immediate privilege in the work I get to do with kids. So early on, I think it was in my very first year of doing this programming, at the end of the year, a student in our sessions just kind of on his own repeated something nearly verbatim that we had said in the very first session we done. So 9 months later, this kindergarten student is remembering word for word something that had come out of my mouth. And the teacher said, my gosh, it blows me away that they have this nearly total recall for the stuff you say to them. And I had to correct her a little bit and say, yeah, but it wasn't me that said that. It was the puppet. And she said, well, yeah, but still, that's amazing. And I stopped her and I said, Lisa, her name's Lisa. I said, Lisa, but you and I probably remember everything Bert and Ernie ever said to us. And her response felt very natural, which was just, well, yeah, of course. And I said, yeah, because somehow humans are just hardwired that when a toy comes to life in front of us, we focus in on that thing. I think that's why like Toy Story is such a hit, no matter the age. Everybody loves that film. It's why we still love the Velveteen Rabbit. It's why like, even though they are all bad, we all laugh at Fozzie's jokes because when toys come alive, real magic occurs for kids, for grown-ups, across the board. I've also, and the kind of the reason I wanted to start with sort of what to me felt like kind of a disclaimer is that I've been to enough of these symposiums or workshops that I probably even view myself with a little cynicism as a presenter at one. Maybe that's just my native state. You all might be far more kind-hearted than I am by nature. But I've heard a lot of people say like, oh, if you do the things I'm telling you, I guarantee you, you will get the results I tell you you will get. And we know that that might be true at times, but it isn't always true because everybody here brings their own energy to the classrooms. Every kid brings their own energy to the classrooms, and those vary day to day. Kids could be in a drastically different place on a Wednesday than they are on a Monday. And we need to learn how to pivot and control that chaos so that no matter what happens, we can find ourselves in a position to find some element of discovery. I always like to think about my sessions as an opportunity to put kids in a place of discovery. And if I can do that successfully, the discovery is in many ways up to them. They can discover something if they're willing to engage fully. And my job is to try and get them to engage fully in the play or the discovery place that I'm trying to build. If we can, Lauren, I'd love to pull up what is slide number 2.
Sure.
The first one's just, I like orange, so I wanted one that was orange. There it is. I love orange. Okay. So this is the way I think about the way a play session can work with kids, with or without a puppet. And we're going to move from left to right across the screen, of course. So my goal is to always start from a place of actual silence, move to a place where their interest is piqued and they want to become involved, which leads to the engagement. And then that engagement can lead to what I like to call chaotic play. And I think there is deep, deep learning that can happen in chaotic play. From there, those kids can discover a place of actual accomplishment. And then sometimes this is the hardest part, is how do we get to a place of chaos, live in it for a little bit, feel accomplishment through that chaos, and then still find a way to close in silence. This is kind of in many ways how I judge my own work too, is that if I can lead the kids through a place of discovery that gets them to a dysregulated state, and they are then able to re-regulate, that is some of the deepest kind of social learning that can happen in our school systems. Now, in contrast to, I know at least one of us, and Lauren, I don't work with preschoolers. Preschool chaos is a whole different kind of chaos. If any of you work with preschoolers, you have my ultimate admiration. I don't know if I could deal with it. I'm lucky I get K through 3 chaos, which is where I feel really comfortable. I'm sure that's a mindset thing too. But I really, really believe that from that chaos, deep learning can come, particularly and even solely from that learning, that ability to dysregulate and re-regulate. So that's kind of the next big question, is how do we play? How do we play with intentionality? How do we play like that? So we can look at another slide, which is a quote we all know. We've heard this probably 1,000 times. I never think it's a bad quote though. So will probably butcher his name. Jean Piaget. I'm happy to be corrected.
That's it.
Yeah.
Rachel was nodding. Call it a win. So play is the work of children. It is. And in so many ways, even our core teachers, even our regular classroom teachers can facilitate that play to find the real work, to find those discoveries. The question I want to ask ourselves, or I want us to ask ourselves, is how can we shape the experience of this play in a classroom with kids? How do we keep it intentional and somehow make it feel organic? And this is kind of the fun one, how can our plans lead students to make those decisions for themselves? So there's that, I was thinking about this earlier today. What's that great quote that's like, diplomacy is the art of letting someone else get your way. And I think about that in a weird way with the students too. My goal is always to have my plan, but to make it so that it's their idea to follow my plan. How do I have a game plan with enough seeds in it that I'm going to plant so that they're the ones who are watering that flower, cultivating it, watching it bloom, and they have full authorship over the experience we're going to have. Part of that comes from deep planning. Part of that comes from the ability to pivot and go somewhere you might not be comfortable with. And there's chaos inside us that can happen in that too. As I was talking through my education director, whose name is Alex Espy here in KC, he had this great line. As I was very weird, I was like, I want to talk about chaos. Is it okay? Like, are teachers going to be okay with me doing this? And he said, Michael, we're theater people, and the very nature of theater is controlled chaos. So I wanted to give him a shout. And like, I love the quote so much, I wrote it down. The first thing I want to talk about is how do we engage with silence at the beginning to lead us somewhere? For me, that turns into classroom management disguised as play. Everything I do, I try and wrap up in play. So the first things I want to think about, and I would love for the conversation to continue here. So if you're on the call and would like to unmute, I'd love to hear your voice, even if you're talking over me, because I hear my voice a lot, and you have been too now for a while. So what do we need to control in our classrooms? What is our classroom management about? To me, the four big ones that I came up with as I embarked on this particular job are visual focus. Where are they looking? Are they looking where I need them to look? Their voices, are they quiet when they need to be quiet? Their hands, are they touching each other in ways that aren't nice? Can we help them control their hands and touch? And then are they moving safely in the classroom? Those are the four big things that matter to me, that I was like, okay, I'm engaging with these kids in this way. These are the four things I need to control or help manage. That's the classroom management part. So here's a solution. This was the solution I came up with at the first time I walk into any classroom for the first time. I walk around, I don't say a word. I pull out an invisible box and I go and I hand it to a kid and I put it on his desk. And then I move to the next kid. And I walk around fully wordlessly, putting this invisible thing, and the kids are losing it. What is he doing? How many times I've heard, is he a mime? Like just all the comments, and they're fine. I'm not going to engage with them. I'm going to look at them. I'm going to smile. I'm going to be calm, and I'm going to slowly put these things at their tables. Then I'm going to say, okay, my name's Michael, and I'm here today, and we get to play together. But I did something really silly at the beginning of our time. Here's what happened. I gave everybody here a present. There's a magic box sitting on your desk, and inside are some pretty wonderful things. Do you want to open them and find out? Okay, let's open our magic boxes. So we open up our magic box. The first thing you're going to find when you reach down inside, I know I would have literally started like this if we had been in person. I promise this would have been, I was so excited. So we reach down inside, and the first thing we pull out is a pair of magic goggles. Let's put them on. And then I remind us that our magic goggles help us see with our imaginations. And I connect that physical move to it. So we pull our goggles on and we do this. And the next thing you're going to find are some magic headphones. With older kids, I've done earbuds. Older kids like earbuds. I'm Generation Xer, so I still like headphones. Those are going to help us hear with our imaginations. I'll also point out that sometimes I'm going to need you to look somewhere. So I might say, oh, pull your goggles down and look at me. We know pull your goggles down means look at me, right? And we'll practice a few times. We'll know that pull your headphones down means, oh, I have something to say. You need to listen. The next thing they're going to find is some magic gloves. They help us hold things and touch things we want to touch with our imaginations. And they remind us that we know we're not supposed to hit each other. We're going to keep safe hands. And if I see somebody forget, I'll just say, oh, remember, pull your gloves on. And that'll remind us to use our safe hands. And then, of course, we have our magic boots. Those are going to help us travel anywhere our imaginations can take us. They're also going to remind us to be slow. And so we'll practice all 4 of those things. So that was the intention I walk in with. Does it always work? Of course not. Does it work more often than not? It does. But I had the greatest moment of chaos one day 2 or 3 years ago when I was doing this. And some kid, this was, I think, the first year without masks in school. And the kid, I think he was a first grader, said, well, we need masks. And I went, and so my thought, okay, if I'm a chaos agent and I need this kid's buy-in, my answer is, you're right, of course we do. Reach in. You just got a magic mask in there. Let's put our magic masks on. Those are going to help us smell things we want with our imaginations. They also can remind us to take nice deep breaths sometimes. And the reason I wanted to point that out is I just absolutely loved that this kid, out of a sense of play, we were playing, he was into the play, he wanted to contribute. And I gave every kid I've ever seen since, that's now part of the curriculum. Now every kid gets a mask. I don't know what I'm going to do when I finally get kids that forgot about masks or didn't know about masks, at least in a school or social setting. And so that's something I really love about this kind of concept of allowing for chaotic play and allowing for that input to be real. So not only were we creating a ritual we were going to do every day, but I was open to that ritual changing, and in this kid having authorship of it. So once we put everything on, including masks, I always say, okay, so now we've got our magic outfits on. From now on, when I come in, let's play this. We won't say anything. We'll just pull our boxes out. And we'll put them on. And we'll do it the same way every time. I always make sure to do it slowly. I always make sure to make eye contact with every student in the room while we're doing it. I want physical eye contact with each person. I know we can't do that on Zoom because if I'm looking in your eyes, I'm looking at a camera. But that is absolutely vital in my mind to this ritual being calming, centering, and focusing. That eye contact. And then there are some side benefits to it too. Like if I know there are some kids in a room that I'm going to need to keep my eye on, well, they might be the kids that I'm looking at when I pull my goggles down. If I look in the room and I see kids that I imagine are going to spend their school days or part of their lives having voices that are being told aren't as important as other people's voices, they're definitely going to be the people I'm looking at when I pull my head down and I let them know I'm listening. Because I want them to know that in that moment, at least while I'm in the room, their voice is going to matter just as much as everybody else's. And the part of that is we have to be vigilant. We've got to do it every time. It's got to be consistent. Once we build it, set it, we do it. At the end of our sessions, we always do that too. Okay, I start to talk really quietly and slowly. Well, friends, we had a great time today. Thank you for letting me play with you. Let's pull out our magic boxes again. Open them up. Let's see how quiet we can be while we take off our boots. And we do it in reverse. And I get quieter and quieter until by the end I'm saying, and so that's my goal, to start with silence and end with silence. As long as that framework can be built, I believe that chaos can happen during the middle of that and we can survive it and recover from it. And they're going to be able to dysregulate and re-regulate.
Can I chime in really quick? Because as
Yes,
you're
that's
talking,
my next thing is let's all chime in. I'd love to stop talking. So let's group chat. What are the things you see that like, oh, you missed this. That won't work for me, but this might. And then Lauren, please kick
I
that
just,
off.
I mean, as you're describing it, it's really interesting too that there's like this huge relationship building that's happening with you and that class in that moment as well. So the eye contact, the ritual and the routine, like that builds a safe community for those kids because they know what to expect. They're having fun. Like, you know, you're setting up the expectation. So there's just this really beautiful community building that's happening in that time as well that allows for the chaos to come later. So thanks for sharing.
Well, and I've seen a lot of presenters, recommend, obviously, like a physical ritual is not like I made that up. I didn't invent that. We've all heard that probably dozens of times. I've heard lots of different versions of that presented. Mine's longer than most. Usually they're like, no, we're going to do this, 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 and then we're moving.
Mm-hmm.
But to me, a lot of this is we're setting the standards of play. So for me, the play is what matters, and that's why I like to do it. But again, I would love to hear from some of you. If you'd like to unmute, or if you are, feel free to stay that way. What are some things you see that like, well, I see a need in my classroom that you didn't address? I'd love to hear some of those thoughts.
I supervise student teachers, and the idea of dysregulation and regulation, I see that so much in elementary children now, so many children who are dysregulated, but I love the idea of starting with those nonverbal cues and ending with those nonverbal cues, and it building to that point where it's like giving them freedom and permission to be dysregulated, because so much of what's happening with them is just trying to keep them under control all the time, and giving them an opportunity to just kind of be free and be themselves, but then learning those tools to bring it back in when they need to.
And be kids. I think
Right.
sometimes we forget.
They have a job to do, and it's
Yeah.
okay. They have a job. That's what it is. I also note, like, hearing this changed my life. Hearing that it takes a total of 3 deep breaths to reset your regulatory system. It takes exactly 3. It takes no more than and no fewer than. And I've so many times, I guarantee you, 75% of the time I've said, you know what? I think we all need to take 3 deep breaths. 75% of the time it's because I need them, but it works every time. You re-regulate, your body changes in the positive way you need in that moment, and so do theirs when they engage with it.
My thoughts are turning toward the practitioner that is allowing themselves to be on 2 tiers, at least 2 tiers at the same time, that they are building an open space for their own play and their own interaction. At the same time, they're establishing safe parameters, and they're monitoring everyone else's interplay and movement within that space that's created. And as I was thinking about what Cynthia said, teachers who are new to the profession are often so locked into, what do I have to do next? What is my sequence of behavioral things, or what is my lesson objective, that they're not yet able to turn loose enough to trust the process. And then to also, not only, like you said a moment ago, Michael, that you need 3 breaths for yourself. And if you do, then they do too.
In fact, I wrote down some of what you said, talking about building our own play as a practitioner. I'm going to speak specifically to that, but not nearly as smartly. So I'm so glad you said that. I'm going to quote you later on. Well done. Thank you.
We have not rehearsed this
we
in
can jump
advance.
to a, oh, I'm sorry, what's that, Phyllis?
We have not rehearsed this in advance. He didn't plan
Right.
it, but still.
We can jump to a slide though. So moving on, if that's how we're going to set up the ability to manage chaos. The next thing, and this is a Carl Jung quote, that in all chaos there is a cosmos, in all disorder a secret order. And that's the place I try to come from. So I have a secret order that I'm hoping things go. And my goal is to frame the chaos in such a way that the kids are going to be the people who choose, who come up with the idea to take us to my secret order. To be able to do that, we have to know where we want to go. We have to know what sort of meta lesson we want to accomplish. Is it math? Are we doing math work? Are we doing history? Are we doing social learning where the goal is they're going to engage, and whatever that engagement is going to bring learning. It's going to bring, hey, person, you have to figure out how to deal with other humans in this planet. That's part of being alive. And it's a lot of what, especially early elementary school is. So having that end goal in sight, knowing where we want to get to, whatever that goal for the play or the lesson is. And then what are the core takeaways? And it's okay if it's just, can we re-regulate? I've had every plan of mine fall apart in a session with kids in a truly chaotic way that isn't comfortable even for me. But if at the end of that, we're taking, by the time we even get to those headphones, if we're taking our headphones off quietly, if we're taking our goggles off, if we're taking those 3 breaths together, they've accomplished something that day. They've learned something. They've figured out how to do something and come back from it, how to go somewhere and return. And how do we do the minutia part? How do we plant seeds so that the kids come up with our ideas? I mean, all I can really do is give some examples of how I've been able to do that along with a couple of techniques. One is, and this is going to be the deep thing we talk about next, is about creating a relationship with the students that is based in authenticity. That is you being the most you person you can be. Because that's the way the kids are going to be able to connect. Like I say, that's a subject that's so deep I could talk for a whole hour just about that. And I'm going to try later on. They'll kick me off at some point. Presenting them with a carrot. So that's again where the puppet makes my world easy. The puppet comes out and introduces play, and then the puppet goes away. And if we're able to accomplish this goal we agreed we wanted to accomplish, the puppet gets to come back out. And if we don't, oh, darn it, we ran out of time. But it's still time to calm down because we had our play. The best way I found to do that, and I'm going to give 2 examples, are that the puppet or anything, anyone, can present the students with an opportunity to show empathy. And that empathy can lead them to make decisions where we will recognize that the student want is equivalent to a student need. So here are the examples. So I've used a series of puppets, a different puppet every month that I'm with these kids this year. And once it's a little baby alien. And I started out and say like, oh, well, it doesn't belong here, but I sure didn't see any big aliens when I found this little baby alien. And then I'm going to kind of wait until somebody asks, well, where's its mom? I don't know. Maybe let's see if it knows. Hey, baby alien, can you tell us where your mom is? The baby alien doesn't talk English. It just said bloop, bloop. So it would just look up and go bloop, bloop, bloop. The kids realize it's in space. I look at them, oh no, what can we do? I did this 40 times last year or last month. No, probably 30 times. Every single session, the kid said, let's build a spaceship. Great. My whole goal was we're going to build a spaceship. That's what I wanted to happen in that session. And every single time the kid had the idea, a kid wanted to do it first. I didn't have to tell them, hey, I got an idea, let's build a spaceship. And that was using their empathy. That was me presenting something that had a problem. Oh my gosh, what can we do to help? And every single time. Is it going to work every single time? Probably not. If I did it for another 2 months, some group of kids wouldn't care. But it worked. I know it's like, I don't know, these are the moments that it's like, okay, this is where the magic happens. I don't know how it worked. It worked. So that's something I've learned. Using empathy expecting them to be empathetic, can open doors for them to come up with these ideas on their own. That's a great tool to use. Another great example, I had a scarecrow puppet who was sad. He came out of the little bag and he was a sad scarecrow. Oh no, what's going on? Well, it's winter time, but I still need to plant crops on my farm and I don't have anyone to help me. 30 times, and every time hands shot in the air. I'll help, I'll help. Oh, great. I need somebody to help build a farm. Everybody wants to help build a farm. So they came up with the idea of helping him because he presented a problem that they could help solve. Now that's when it works. That's when it's successful. What happens when it isn't? So what happens when a kid wants to move this way when you thought you want us to go this way? The kid wants to go this way. What do? Well, in a beautiful world, you do it. You go, okay, today I'm going this way instead of the way I thought we were going to go. It's also okay to say, maybe let's see if there are some other ideas. And too many times, I wish I didn't have to say this, but like, oh my gosh, I only have so much time, and I don't think we have time to do that today. And then the hardest part for me was definitely learning to just simply say no. That's the hardest thing to do around kids, especially when they are engaging in playful manner. So a lot of times I'll be like, you know what, you can do that. If you're playing, if you're engaged, if you're helpful, great, let's do it. I'm also, speaking of watching my time. So we can jump to a slide. And this is the last slide. I'm not a big slide guy. I think these are the first slides I've ever made. This is the really deep thing. And this is where I find myself in a constant state of practice of bettering my work. And a lot of it's based off of, or at least we can gain it from this quote, that chaos is rejecting all you have learned. Chaos is being yourself. Emile Cioran. I know I don't know how to say this guy's name, but there's my shot at it. And that's when, to me, it all comes down to the more authentic I can be, the more Michael I am in front of the kids, the more successful the kids are. When I am able to remove everything that is inauthentic, that's when the connection gets real with kids. I did start as a performer. I started working in education when I was about 18, but I found it through theater. I was a performer for many years. I did it professionally, union member, all that stuff. And when you're making your living doing that, you've got to do lots of stuff. So I did lots of grown-up theater. I did lots of kids theater. And one of the truest lessons I learned in that is that adult audiences are great. They're savvy enough, they're grown-ups. They know that if they're bored or it's not really that funny, they'll pretend along. They'll be polite. They'll wait till the curtain comes up. They'll go home and talk about how much they hated the play. Kids aren't polite. If they hate the play, you'll know during the play because they won't be paying attention. They'll turn around, they'll talk to each other, they'll get up, wander away. Kid audiences are the cruelest and harshest audiences in the world. And that is, it's just absolutely true. And what I learned doing it is that the less artifice you approach kids with, the more they trust you. If you are absolutely being honest with them at all times, they're going to believe you. With the puppet practice, I actually had to kind of fight for this at first. Every time kids meet a puppet and the puppet goes away, I look at them and I say, okay, we all really know what Marcus is, right? They're like, yeah, he's a scarecrow. I'm like, yeah, but what is he really? He's a puppet. You're right. He's just a puppet. He's a toy I get to play with, but he's just a toy and we're using our imaginations. I really early on decided that I was unwilling to pretend that the play was not play, that it was real, that I was going to be like, oh no, we can't, we can't treat him as alive because the kids will know I'm lying to them. We can play and we can all play pretend together. But the second I pretend something that isn't real is real and I'm trying to convince them of it, that's when they know they can't trust me or that they don't need to trust me. So I'm very serious about that stuff. Even in the puppet work, we always admit we're just playing. The other thing I always find myself constantly policing in myself is my tone of voice. The second I walk into a kindergarten room and I start talking like this, that's not the real Michael. Michael talks like this. When he needs to talk loudly, he talks like this. But Michael just talks like Michael. I want to talk to these kindergartners the same way I talk to their teachers when the kids aren't in the room, the same way I talk to any grown-up or kid I meet. That kind of authenticity, I think it's a subtle, deeply psychological thing, but I think it tracks. And then the bottom line is always tell the truth, especially when it comes to, hey, we have an element of play that we're gonna use our imaginations around. But we all know we're just using our imaginations, right? I remember once I put the puppet up and they were like, can he breathe in there? And I went, he's just a puppet. He doesn't have to breathe. Yeah. And sure, I could have played along and we could have had a little pretend, but I thought in that moment, it's like the authenticity matters more than the continued play. Because that is the key for me. It's the more, Gary Shandling used to talk about this in terms of comedy. He said that his goal as a comedian was to consistently be the truer and truer version of Gary Shandling. And when he could do that, he was getting better. That's how I feel as an educator too.
It's really interesting. Sorry, I'm going to jump back in.
Please, yeah.
It's really interesting because you're talking a lot about like you, like having the kids trust you, but there's a trust that you have in them as well. Like in the tone that you're choosing, like I trust that you are, you know, capable of understanding me. And sometimes like if we speak down to children because we think they're, you know, kindergartners and they won't understand this word, it's like, okay, well, we're not building that connect, like they can read that in us. And so that authenticity piece is just like I love hearing that over and over again because it's just really, really important, especially for our young learners to just, you know, feel like they're part of it and they're in it with you. And so I just think that's really valuable.
I kind of stole that over. My first educational work was with, this is going to be a different part of this than I even thought I was going to mention. So my first work in education was in HIV and STD education with high schools. So we were sending, and I was doing it as well. So we were sending performers and medical students into high schools. And they were presenting monologues as HIV positive teens. And then they would talk about, say, okay, well, that's not really me. I was acting. But now we're going to answer any questions you have about this stuff that we just brought up. And in it, I did it for a little bit. And then I started to train the people that do it because the idea was that it's peer education. And there was a time where, you know, the bosses looked at me and said, Michael, there's no high schooler on the planet that's going to think you're still their peer. I was like, all right, I can respect that. But then I started to train and coach the people who did perform. And we did this for almost 30 years. This program was active. And the one thing I always tried to impress to people is when we talk about that concept of peer education, don't treat it like you need to act like a high schooler. Treat it like you assume they are your peer, that they can speak on the level you're here to speak about. And that's how I treat kindergartners too. I treat them like I would a high school. I mean, obviously I'm not talking about those subjects, but it's a pretty varied education career from that to puppets. Okay, so if there are no thoughts or questions, we can move on to what I think is the fun, crafty part of our day. So hopefully everybody has a piece of paper. I have cardstock, so it's going to make mine a little more solid. And then I'm going to show you very quickly what our end result very possibly could be. So I've got this little guy here. Hi, how's it going? It's nice to see you. I'm not used to turning my head this way or that way. Okay. Very simple hand puppet, a mouth puppet that I've seen kindergartners make. So I know it can happen. With our blank piece of paper, we're going to hold it upright, long ways. And then not quite a third, we're going to fold over. So less than a third fold over, which we're going to match on the other side. And hopefully we will see that there's a bit showing. The goal is that your 4 fingers can still fit to some degree down there. So we want a little bit here. And you can give that a nice crease. If there are any origami folks, we'd call this a mountain fold versus a valley fold. And when you get it, you can hold it up so I can know we can move on to step 2. Luckily, there are very few steps. This is the fun part. I've done this with teachers, I've done this with kids. I absolutely adore this kind of work too. All right, so if we've got this, we're going to, with the blank, so we'll call this the line side and this the blank side. You want to do a fold so that the blank side is folded against itself and the line side is what we still see. And you can give that a nice crease. So now we've got a little 2 parts of a triangle. And the last real step is now we're going to take these parts and we're going to fold that up to meet that center fold. And then mirror that on the other side as well. So now we've re-exposed the blank side and the lined side is hidden. And now we've got a little M for Michael or Maggie, or a W for nobody here's name starts with a W, or a Greek E for, no, we don't have any E's either. Okay. Cool. Then if you have some tape with you, and for students, I would definitely recommend using a little tape. Then you can simply tape, just to make sure it's not going to fly open on you. Tape that lined side so that when you get your hand in, and then this is kind of what we sort of start with, but if we think about curving our hand up a little bit, we're going to be able to expose more of the face. So we can have eyes, and if we wanted a nose. And I'm looking at yours, Maggie. Are you feeling good about it? Oh, we can't hear you. Your mute is on. Okay, so now we've got our mouth puppets. Now I'm lucky enough to have a company with a shop that has one of those Cricut or Cricut things, and they cut out a bunch of these. But before we even worry about giving this thing a face or features or a body, this is what, and I love this series of questions that I always ask. So, is there anything in the world? This is just my Puppet 101 moment. So if you ever play with puppets, this is applicable to you. If you ever use them in your practice, I would recommend thinking about this stuff. Is there anybody here who can think of anything in the world that is alive that doesn't move, that is fully still? Feel free to respond if you've got one. Or respond with what you think a kid might say.
A tree.
Oh, you're right. Except what happens when the wind blows?
It moves.
And even though it's going really slowly, those trees are growing, aren't they? So trees still move. Is there anything else? Okay, well, let me try this. I'm going to try and stand really, really still. But you'll probably see me doing something that's moving. And when you tell me, or when you see it, you can just shout it out.
Breathing.
There you go. So what would it look like if our puppets had to breathe? I always love it when somebody makes theirs a mouth breather too. It makes me super happy.
I'm breathing as well. Like, I'm doing it.
Oh yeah, what a great way to regulate your own breathing too. We were talking about taking 3 deep breaths. All I'm doing right now is that this is kind of my hand shape inside the puppet, and I'm just bringing that circle in a little bit. That's my technique. Yours can be different. It can be whatever you want. So we know our puppets can breathe. That means they can live. But if it's a person puppet, what's the very first thing a puppet does when it's born into this world? It breathes. And then what does it do?
Cry.
Yeah. The first thing people do is have an emotional reaction. So let's take a look at what happens if our puppet is sad. What happens if it has to cry? And spend some time with your students or with yourself if you're working on your own puppetry. Spend some time with a sad puppet. What happens if it happens, if it's happy? Maybe it wants to dance. Maybe it's so excited it's jumping. What about a puppet that's mad? And another great thing I'm noticing is that so many of our faces are also getting involved in that emotional state. Puppet performers do that all the time. I did some professional puppetry before I started working with this company, but just sort of as happenstance, like when you're making your living as a performer, sometimes somebody's going to put a puppet in your hand and pay you for it, so you're down. And that's something I definitely learned, is that like your emotional state is the puppet's emotional state. So if you need a puppet to be away, you can get there too. If you're happy, but I'm usually in those moments, I'm not looking out happy. I'm looking at the puppet, feeling the puppet's emotion. A great trick to remember is that like wherever your focus is, that's where the students are going to look. If you're looking over here, they're going to want to know what's over there. But if you're looking here, so are they. And those are great things to tell the kids too. So I had thought, and I didn't know how many we were going to have, but now that we've got our little puppets, I would love somehow, I'm sure that you can, through the organization, send off what you might make of these. We sadly do not have the time to like get all our markers out and probably go whole hog on it, but let's do a little bit of creativity on these faces here. So the one thing I'll point out before we start making any marks on our puppets, when we're looking at our faces, what's the first facial feature we come across? Our eyes. So the eyes need to be at the top. Then comes the nose. And then, do we need to draw a mouth on these puppets? No, it's already got a mouth. You can color it in if you want. But I've seen so many kids and grown-ups draw two eyes, a nose, and a smile, and then go, once they realized what they've done. So I always try and get out in front of that one. And even when I get out in front of it, people still do it, even grown-ups. So we can take something and come up with what our puppet's eyes might look like. If they want to have a nose, maybe they do. I think mine is going to have a nice, we'll make him a little like me, he'll have a nice big pointy nose. And of course, this is the creative part. This is where kids get to create who they want to be. I want to spend just a few minutes talking about how this exercise, this puppet making stuff, can connect to our core subjects in our classrooms. Again, I work with elementary schools, so those are the core subjects I'm more like keyed in on. But this is the stuff you definitely like you can take. And I've done this with teachers who walked in going, okay, puppet guy, and walked out going, I think I'm going to do some of this stuff. So I challenge you, see if you can find a way. And then I'm really excited for the discussion after this, because this is where you guys can come up with ideas that I haven't thought of for how we can use these in some core work. For reading, the reading is the easiest thing. Reading is about reading comprehension. Can we recreate the story we've read? Do we remember the series of events? Do we understand the motivations of these characters? So if you're reading a picture book with kids, have them make puppets of the characters and replay the story. Oh Lord, it's amazing. She's great. I love her. That's really, really easy. And then you can even do it with just normal stories that they know. A group of 4 can do The Three Billy Goats Gruff, super easy. A group of 4 can do Goldilocks and the Three Bears, super easy. A group of 3 can do Hansel and Gretel, super easily. So the reading one is the fun one. That's the one I was like, if we'd had time, I was going to break you all off and like force you to create your own little chaos of, you've got 3 minutes to rehearse a Goldilocks and the Three Bears. I don't think we'd have enough time to come back and do it and still all have our evenings as we anticipate them. Science can be a tough one. How do we connect? What's that?
I said we'll have to do a part 2.
Well, that's possible. That's for sure. How are we going to take puppets and teach science? Here's my idea. For First off, what if we weren't making people? What if we were learning about animals and, well, we know that bats really just have extra long fingers with webs in between them. Oh my gosh, so we can study the anatomy of animals as we're building puppets of those animals. We can talk about how, I don't know, like lions have big sharp teeth. Oh, we're going to have to make sure we draw the teeth right or make teeth for it. What are canine teeth versus, if we're going to make cows, what are grinding teeth? Tons of science we can investigate while building puppets there. I also love the idea, and about the second grade at the schools I'm in, that's when they start doing like research papers on scientists. They start investigating George Washington Carver. What all did George Washington Carver just study? Who is Sally Ride? What did Sally Ride do? And this is what a great opportunity for a kid to learn about someone, make a puppet of them, and have the puppet tell everybody else in class about themselves. So all of a sudden, this is Copernicus, and I'm going to tell you about what Copernicus did. I actually know more about Sally Ride than Copernicus, so don't test me on that one.
Even letting
The
their
math
puppets,
is,
sorry.
no, please, yeah.
You just got my, I'm full of ideas now. Even just having them talk with each other, like sometimes, like if a kid is, especially in science, if they're not feeling comfortable sharing out about a scientist or a specific thing, like having the puppet talk is almost like building that safety net of like, oh, it's not really me, it's the puppet. And so then like working in that small group or, you know, and then having each other share the other person's things. So there's like so many ways to build off of it and allow more entry points for more students to participate.
100%. These things make it so safe to talk in front of other people. I also just, you saying that got me really, and I was like, oh, now I want to see like the second grade puppet version of the Aristotle Plato dialogues.
Yeah.
That sounds great. I'd love to see that. Math can be a rough core subject for the arts, right? That's the tough one. I've spent a year doing math lessons with kids and puppets now, and they have all been a struggle to get on paper, to come up with how are we doing subtraction? What, like, when we do building blocks of multiplication, I'm just a puppet guy. So for some ways you can introduce play where, like, I think for subtraction, we all became snowmen. I liked snow people because they weren't all men. And then we all had magic hair dryers and we would start melting them 3 or 4 at a time and having to figure out, oh, how many snowmen do we have now? We had 17, we just melted 3. What's that? And let the kids figure it out or help them by counting down. So you can introduce math subjects that way. We've also got shapes. This is a shape. We have to fold it in quarters. We have to fold it in almost thirds. You have to fold it at one point, you have to fold in half. There's so many ways math is involved in the minutia of the making of it, but that's where I think the math can come into play. Pardon me. The social studies and history stuff, that's also super great. That's where, hey, during any of our like traditional months, African American History Month, Women's History Month, Asian Pacific Islander Month, we can, when we're studying people from history, let's make them. They don't have to be scientists. They can just be a person from a time period. Did a bit about the American Revolution, and we decided that we were going to all make puppets of the not famous people, but just the townspeople, the people who might side with the rebels, who might side with the king. And what do they want? What was the time period like? And how are we going to make a puppet that can tell us what their life was like in that time? That was an older kid. That was like 4th to 5th grade, I think. Current events is easy. I see a lot of kids do reports. It's like everybody wants to do a report on Kobe Bryant or Taylor Swift. Walking through the hallways, I see tons of reports on those people. But again, let's have them tell their own stories. We can become our heroes and talk about them in that way. And then the other is about the social learning aspect of stuff. When we get our emotions involved, and here's the interesting thing to me, every time you have a kid engage with another kid, that lesson is happening. We don't have to frame it specially because we know that so much of early elementary is about how are we going to start to engage with the world around us and the people in it? All of those engagings, even if it's troubling, even if it's chaotic, even if it's messy, that experience is a part of their learning process. And so we can exemplify that. We can make it a, oh, there's a problem on the playground. Well, let's have puppet A, you stole my ball. I wanted it. Well, what are we going to do? How are these puppets going to resolve that problem? But I firmly believe that anytime we ask a kid to engage with another kid, that learning is happening. We have 2 minutes before 5:30. I would happily welcome any questions. I would happily welcome anybody saying, really, this thing? Are you sure? Challenge me on stuff. And you very likely are right. And I can learn something today too. I'd love it.
I'm thinking of like the history and the science stuff too, like when, you know, if a student is doing a research paper on Taylor Swift, for instance, like there's not a whole lot happening other than like reading and then reading and reciting, right? But then if they're creating a puppet, there's so much more that goes into it. Like what's her style? How would you like express her personality through this? How, like, there's so many other layers into who is this person beyond just like, oh, I read this sentence and now I'm gonna, you know, put it in my report or whatever. So I just love like it took us 5 seconds to make those paper puppets and how many skills will come out of that, even if it's just a paper, you know, like you can add so much more to it, but just even having that simple tool right there of like, oh yeah, let's quickly work together and do this and do that. Like there's just so many layers to it, social emotional, academically, you know, higher level thinking skills. So yeah, it's making me think about ways to use it with my little ones as well.
And what kid who loves Taylor Swift wouldn't love to have a Taylor Swift puppet to take home? So the
Right.
buy-in becomes deeper, hopefully, possibly, in that moment because, oh, I'm making this thing I get to keep, and it's a Taylor puppet, Tay-Tay, on my, I get to play with her whenever I want. I can make a Jason or a Travis Kelce puppet too. Actually, I had a group of teachers do that when I was asking them to make Goldilocks and the Three Bears. They did like a thing about Taylor going to the Super Bowl instead. It was chaotic. I loved it.
But even building that like passion for, you know, everybody, most people love Taylor Swift. I would say everybody, but there might be one or two humans on this earth who don't. But like even with our historical people that we're learning, like to build that connection and passion to them as well is really fun.
I have a question, and it is in regard to your colleague's comment about controlled chaos and being comfortable in chaos, in a climate where chaos's blessings and gifts are not necessarily embraced or by some external stakeholders are feared. So how do you address people who
Well, there's a lot of ways to interpret that question.
Yes.
I mean, obviously, in our grown-up world, it's chaos out there, y'all. Like, it is, and it's going to get worse, and it's going to get better, and it's going to ebb, and it's going to flow, and who knows what's going to happen in November? It could be crazy. And who knows what's going to happen after that? Not a clue. When I'm talking about that, obviously, I'm talking about like, are we comfortable with kids getting loud? Are we comfortable with the classroom situation getting messy? And that's a hard thing to learn. It is hard. I just have seen many times where I've felt the need to control that the kids are backing away from the other stuff too. So you got to control it. We do have to have controlled chaos, but that means we have to be comfortable enough to let it show up enough that we can use it and direct it towards these play sessions we want to have. Now, again, like I said earlier, I'm so lucky. I'm in there for 45 minutes a month. I get to walk out of the room when I'm done. I am always sure to hand those kids back as quietly as I found them because I like these teachers and I want them to like me. And so that's a really good point. It's a learning process. And then I've also made mistakes and things have gotten too chaotic and I've lost control. And so have they. And that's when we can take those deep breaths. We do know that can help re-regulate us. Even if we don't think it does, it does. Even if we're still feeling the emotion, enough of our bloodstream has reconfigured itself that we're calmer than we were. You're right, and it's especially hard if you're in there with them all day. It's so much harder. I'm so lucky that that's not my story. But I still believe that there are moments where you can create that and you can use it in a focused manner. Now, in my 45 minutes, there's maybe a minute and a half to 2 minutes of moments that I think are actual chaos. Everything else is controlled, and you open up that window for them to get there. So it's about maintaining that too. But I appreciate that, Phyllis. Thank you.
Yes, and I also think that one in it from a management standpoint, if you have your goggles, you have your earphones and the other tools that you provided the students, when it does get beyond the comfort of hey, the chaos exceeds a comfort level, that you can utilize those tools to bring it back, and then you're basically re-regulating the entire class structure through those tools. But I was actually thinking more about the external stakeholders that would discourage chaos from a place of fear because they don't understand the magic that happens through chaotic experiences and finding harmony after the chaos.
Well, that's one of the reasons I was like worried about presenting this material to you all in this way. I even went to my boss and was like, is this a bad idea? Because normally I don't mention it to the teachers, I just do it. I don't say the word chaos or chaotic play very often at all, even though I feel like that's where I traffic. Once they've seen it be successful, that's when I feel comfortable saying like, boy, there was a little, that way that got chaotic, huh? But they pulled it back, didn't they? Boy, it wasn't that nice that they could go there and still come back. So regulation's a great word to use instead. And yeah, it's a buzzword. It's a really harsh thing. I even was surprised to not find material about the phrase chaotic play. It's not really out there. Not that I'm seeing. I'd love to get material that use that phrase. But it is something to be scared of because it's easy to go over the line. It's really easy. And sometimes those headphones don't help us be quiet at all. And I just sit there holding mine on. And then luckily every once in a while, like, oh, I noticed this person's being quiet. Oh, wow, I see this person's doing a good job of pulling their headphones down. And you've got to be comfortable with it feeling uncomfortable sometimes. But when it comes to administrators, yeah, it's tough. I wouldn't say that to one of my principals unless they'd seen me do it. That's just, I mean, I'll be honest, like that's hard to say out loud, but that's me being authentic. Like sometimes I keep some of this on the inside. That's true. So that I can do the work I want with the kids and not have somebody, is this guy crazy? Is this guy ruining these kids? Like, no, I promise it's going to work. I hope. Or if not, I'll pivot.
Yeah.
I do have one group. Here's an example. I have one group, 3 months. They have just not been able to get it done. And so I went to their teacher. I mean, like, I was like, guys, I'm sorry. It's time for me to leave. We didn't do half the stuff I wanted to do because we had to wait too long. So I went to the teacher and she thought I was going to say like, your kids need to behave. But I said, I'm approaching your kids wrong. I'm bringing too much chaos into this room. I need to approach them gently. And I'm going to create an alternate lesson plan that's the gentle version just for your classroom. She's a very gentle woman. Her voice is soft and gentle, and they're great for her. They weren't the problem. My energy was the problem. So I had some adjusting to do. I needed to learn. We'll still get chaotic. It'll just be the version that they can live with and they can get to and come back from. And I'm excited because I see them next week and I hope I'm right.
And if you authentically have built that relationship, you begin to find the path.
I know we're way past our time. I'm going to tell one tiny other story. One of the proudest I've ever felt in my life in this job is one of my biggest failures. And it was the last session I had with that exact class and that teacher. And it just wasn't happening and they couldn't be quiet and they couldn't kind of keep their hands off each other. And I had to keep stopping and I had to use my big, I'm going to talk over everybody voice, which is authentic sometimes. And I remember looking at the teacher, they finally got quiet and I just looked at the teacher and I was just honest. And I said, I don't know what to do. And it's the most authentic I've ever been in front of those kids. It was me admitting that I wasn't doing a good job in front of the students. But I could tell there was a moment in there that went, whoa, this guy's being absolutely real right now. I still had adjusting to do. I still do have adjustments to do for that group. I think I've got a good game plan. I think I'm going to walk in there the right way, but it doesn't always work. And sometimes you got to pivot hard and fast. And sometimes you missed your chance and you got to try again next month.
I think bringing them into the conversation too is really, like, I have found that in our chaotic play that, like, sometimes they do really well and sometimes it's like a full moon and it's just not working for us. But being able to come together as a space and have that authentic moment where you say, you know what, guys, I'm really confused. I'm not sure what's happening today. Like, can somebody tell me what's going on? And then, like, letting them take accountability for what's happening as well. And then reiterating that and trying again. So giving them that opportunity to reflect and then put that to practice. And sometimes you have to come back and reflect several times before it works, but like giving them again, like, hey, I trust you as a human and I'm here to work with you and we're a team in this, and like how can we make this work? And letting them take ownership in that plan as well can be really helpful.
Yeah. I've just dropped my email in the comments or in the chat. Please write it down. Please, if you have thoughts, concerns, if you think, hey, this Michael dude's a charlatan and I need to call him out to his face, please feel free to email me. That's great. I would love to hear from you. And I'd love to further this conversation. I think it's fascinating. I feel very fortunate to get to do what I do with the people I get to do it with. And I feel very fortunate for the Missouri Alliance for Arts Education for allowing me to come in and speak to you all about this and make these connections. Thank you all. I'm happy to stay connected as well.
Thank you so much. This was such a great session. I hope everybody can walk away with a little nugget somewhere in there. I do hope that you guys can come back. We have one more session for this year's cycle. It's going to be a couple teachers that were involved in the Kansas City, Missouri Kennedy Center Partners in Education program. So several teachers from across the state that are going to share out how they engaged in arts integration this year, and tell us a little bit about the program too, to try to get some new recruits for our the program next year. So we hope you can join us for that and just hear all the different arts integration strategies and techniques being used. As always, shoot me an email if you would like a certificate for continuing ed. You can get an hour of time with us. And last but not least, in the chat, I dropped a quick survey. We are always looking for suggestions on how to improve our main events and recruit more people to join us. We would love to build a big community of arts integration instructors and learners, and just do what we can for our kiddos at our school. So Michael, thank you so much for your time and with your sharing your successful workshops and puppetry and everything there. And thank you all for joining us and sticking around a little longer. Hope you have a great rest of your school year, and we'll see you in May.